The night before it happened, Danny Fenton was supposed to finish his homework and fix a toaster. He stood in his parents' basement, a tangle of wires like sleeping vipers across the floor, the Fenton portal humming with a tone he could feel in his teeth. He'd told Tucker and Sam he'd run one last diagnostic and crash. He lied, to himself mostly. Curiosity tugged at him like fishing line. He leaned into the glow, gloves off so he could feel the static prickle his skin. 2 seconds, he whispered. The portal answered with a pulse that rolled through the concrete, unmade the floor under his shoes, and swallowed him whole. He fell through color. Green on black. 1,000 whispered names like wind through glass. When he hit ground, it wasn't ground he recognized. The sky was a bruise and the air tasted like old pennies and smoke. Buildings rose like broken teeth. And the noise. Thunder that wasn't thunder, a machine heartbeat that shook the rubble to dust. Danny coughed, pushed himself up, and realized he wasn't the loudest thing here. A figure the size of a pickup truck strode from a drift of ash, armor blue as deep water, visor burning with a baleful green. Another followed. And another. A whole phalanx of metal-clad giants moved with a patient violence that said they'd been doing this for centuries. "Identify," boomed a voice from within a helm that looked carved from the idea of war. Muzzles swiveled. Ceramite fingers tightened on triggers. To them, he must have looked like a ghost because he was one, technically. Panic pricked the back of his neck. He put both hands up. "I'm, lost." They answered with gunfire. Bolts the size of soda cans screamed toward him, each one its own tiny explosion. Instinct took the wheel. The world went a notch colder and his cells remembered how to forget matter. The shells tore through him and blossomed on the shattered wall behind. He winced. "Okay, that's fair," he muttered, and drifted sideways as a second volley stitched the air he had occupied. He could have fled. He didn't. A woman's scream knifed through the clamor from somewhere under a collapsed arch Danny Dove, phased, and came up with a bleeding guardsman slung across his shoulders. He zipped her to cover, set her down, and turned just as one of the giants charged, chainsword howling. Danny's fist snapped out, became ectoplasm mid-swing, and smashed the blade into sparks. The giant stumbled. For a heartbeat the battlefield held its breath. "Cease," another voice commanded, deeper, older, not louder but heavier, as if it were spoken by the planet through a throat of stone. The charging warrior stepped back. Danny looked up into a faceplate carved with a laurel and a stylized U. The man behind it stepped forward, sword down. "I am Captain Mason Cole of the Ultramarines," he said. "State your nature. How long you got?" Danny said, trying for a smile and getting a grimace. "Name's Danny. Danny Phantom." "What god do you serve, Danny Phantom?" "Kinda just people," he said. "I help people." That, it turned out, was the most dangerous answer in a place like this. They bound his hands with a chain that hummed with intent and carried him aboard a Thunderhawk whose smell of machine oil and sensor smoke burned behind his eyes. On the flight up, the world below unrolled like a brown scab. The ship pierced cloud and then dark, and then the black was crowded with ships shaped like cathedrals locked in orbit, all buttresses and gun decks and statues of saints who were tired of forgiving. They locked him in a room full of angels that were actually statues and sensors that were actually sigils. An old man with bionic eyes like polished dimes entered with 2 robed figures whose incense tasted like iron filings. "Inquisitor Varro," the old man said, as if the words themselves could pull the room to attention. He studied Danny as one might study a stain on a holy relic. "You are not of the warp and yet you touch it. You phase, through matter, through oaths. That is how demons lie. I will know what you are." Danny tried honesty because everything else here was a blade. He explained about Amity Park, about ghosts that were echoes with teeth, about a portal that said hello to the afterlife and forgot to say goodbye. He said, "I don't want to hurt anyone. I actually can't stand it. But I will if it means protecting people." The Inquisitor's stare could have steamed milk. He raised 2 fingers. The robed figures, tech priests, Danny would learn, chanted in Benharic, a language that sounded like a modem drowning. Runes flared around Danny's wrists, bit his skin with freezing heat. "Lie," Varro said softly, "and you will scream." Danny met the old man's machine eyes. You want the truth? Your planet's in trouble. Something is coming. I felt it the minute I arrived. It's behind your stars. I don't know what it wants, but it wants everything. Captain Cole's helm hissed as it sealed. He looked at the Inquisitor. Varro looked at the ceiling as if listening to it. Then the sirens began. The first impact rattled the ship like a bell. On the hololith, a bloom of sickly light opened over the planet like a wound. The tech priests whispered, and even the machine spirits must have shivered. Warp breach, someone breathed. The veil tears. Alarms stacked on alarms. Cole boomed orders and men became movement. Varro's gaze flicked back to Danny and did the arithmetic of necessity. Prove your nature, ghost, he said, and he unhooked the chains with a key of bones and gears. The breach split the sky like a smile full of knives, and from it poured things that looked drunk on the concept of shape. They fell into atmosphere like rain that hated you personally and began to make the city into a cathedral for their god. A cathedral of mouths. Danny hit the air and it hit back, hot as breath from a furnace. He could feel the wrongness, the warp bleeding through, an ocean trying to drown a desert. He dove, a comet of green through ash storm, and landed before a swarm of howling forms that laughed in 13 voices. He didn't scream his catchphrase. He didn't need to. He just let go. The ghostly wail ripped through the enemy like a hurricane through confetti. Windows shattered a mile away. Demons dissolved to steam. The shockwave left a crater that glowed like moss on old stone. For a second, just a second, the wrongness in the air dimmed as if surprised. Then the storm roared back. The ultramarines hit the ground around him. Blue pillars amid entropy. Bolters spoke in their brutal grammar. A dreadnought plowed through fire like a cathedral decided to walk. Cole fell in beside Danny, sword turning filth to fireworks. Your debt is not yet paid, Spectre, he said without looking at him. But we will consider this a down payment. They fought until the sun forgot to set and simply hid. Cassie, the guardsman Danny had saved, found them under a colonnade of rebar and reproofs where a hospital had once taken vows. She pressed a blood-slick wrist against the rosette on her collar. They're building something, she groaned. In the old basilica. A gate. Varro's voice crackled over Helmvox. Confirmed. A sorcerer of the Black Legion leads the rite. If the gate completes, this world is a memory. All units converge. They ran. The city tried to trip them with its own guts. Every alley belched tongues. Every window watched. The basilica hunched on the horizon like a guilty conscience. As they neared, the air thickened with whispers. Danny could taste the words. Hunger-making, forever words. He stumbled and Cole's gauntlet caught his arm, iron steady. Do not listen, the captain said. Do not think. Do not feel. Faith is a blade. Hold it tight. Inside, the nave thrummed. Candles the size of oaks burned with colors that didn't exist before the first sin. At the altar, a figure in armor black as wet stone raised a staff crowned with a screaming eye. Chains ran from the staff to the throats of civilians who knelt, mouths open in silent hymns. The sorcerer's voice layered itself over everything. Witness, he rasped. A door in a dead man's dream. Danny went cold all the way through. The prisoners' souls were hooked like marionettes, strings woven into the coming gate. He could feel the path being cut through the veil, a road paved with consented terror. He took a step and the sorcerer noticed him, and that attention was like a hood pulled over the world. Little Echo, the thing in black crooned. Little almost. We could make you whole. No more hunger. No more regret. Power without price. Power always has a price, Danny said. His hand shook. He made them stop. You just pass it to someone else. The sorcerer laughed, a broken glass sound. You are a door pretending to be a boy. Open. The staff came down. The eye screamed. The prisoners cried out in one voice and the gate flared, green swallowing gold. Cole charged, roaring the kind of oath that could hammer a soul back into shape. Demons lunged, but ultramarines made a wall and bled like stones bleed. Danny rose, weightless, and flung himself at the staff. He phased at the last second, hand sinking into the screaming eye, reaching past polished malice to the knot of wills bound under it. He found fear. He found hope so thin it was almost a rumor. He found the thread of the gate's pattern and pulled. The sorcerer shrieked. Lightning laid tongues of fire along the pews. Power poured through Danny like melted stars. Something inside him strained. Not a bone, not a tendon, but the rule that said he belonged to one world at a time. It hurt. He held on. Cassie crawled to the nearest prisoner and cut a chain with a knife that had seen too many bad days. A tech priest skittered to the altar and vomited code prayer into the staff circuitry. Machine spirits sulked and then hissed and then bit. Cole's blade punched through the sorcerer's pauldron, buried to the hilt. For the Emperor, he growled, which in this place was the same as saying, for the idea that something good deserves to live. The staff cracked. The eye burst like an eggshell under a boot. The gate screamed as if it knew it had almost been born and had learned the concept of disappointment. It imploded, clawing at everything on its way down. The shock threw Danny through a fresco of saints who refused to flinch. He hit the floor and the world went sideways. When he could hear again, the basilica was just a building that had been tired before the war and was now a ruin that couldn't remember being holy. The civilians sobbed. The tech priest crooned to a smoking cogitator as if it were a frightened animal. Cole stood over the sorcerer's steaming corpse like a lighthouse aimed at a graveyard. Varro arrived with a retinue of men whose robes had read more books than most planets. He took in the scene with a glance that weighed and measured and recorded. Observation, Varro said to no one and everyone. The anomaly operates as neither demon nor classic psyker. It exerts will through phasic transgression in defiance of mundane ontology. Hypothesis. Weaponize. It was the coldness that did it. The way the old man spoke about Danny as if he were a shovel you could bury a city with. Danny stood, wobbled, and faced him. I'm not a weapon, he said. I'm a person. Varro's gaze didn't soften, but something behind it shifted, as if a machine paused to listen to wind. In the Imperium, he said, we do not have the luxury of that distinction. Make it, Danny said. His voice surprised him. It had steel in it. Make the luxury. Cole's helm clicked open. The captain's face was a map of scars and patience. Inquisitor, he said mildly, the way a boulder might speak to rain. Without him, we are dead men discussing semantics. Without control, Varro replied. Hope is treachery wearing perfume. The stalemate held for a breath, then 3. In the end, the universe broke it for them. The hololith flared again, red upon red. Orbit, those cathedral ships, had become a battlefield. A new fleet bled in from unreality, and its prows were carved from nightmares. Chaos reinforcements. The planet would not survive a second gate. Varro sighed, a small human sound that made him suddenly older. Burden accepted, he said as if confessing to a priest. He turned to Danny. We need a miracle ghost. Can you give me one more? The plan belonged to madmen and saints. The enemy fleet's command ship, the Maledict, carried a nascent warp core hacked with sigils, a heart they could stop if someone could phase through a hull designed to mock physics and ghost through Vox-shielded decks while a war screamed around them. Someone who could slip past reality and punch a hole in an idea. They painted him with sigils that were prayers and math equations. Cassie pressed a lucky charm into his palm, a strip of flak jacket with a smile drawn on it in pen. Cole rested his armored hand on Danny's shoulder and said, Honor is a compass. When the sky goes strange, follow it. They launched in a coffin with engines and dodged debris that still remembered being men. The hull of the Maledict filled the view, black metal veined with sick light. Danny exhaled, let the cold in, and fell through the wall. He became silence. He became the space between heartbeats. Inside, the ship felt like a cathedral that hated hymns. Corridors bent the wrong way. Voices crawled. He stayed small and quick and uninteresting as a sigh, slipping past twisted Astartes who wore their sins like jewelry. He found the core, a sphere of glass that wasn't glass, cradled in bone that wasn't bone, engraved with texts that made his eyes water. A sorcerer prayed to it with knives. Danny touched the sphere. It remembered being a star. It remembered wanting to fall. He whispered to it. He said, "Sleep." It said, in a voice like a funeral drum, "No." He poured himself into the fractures in its logic, into the hairline cracks where faith had been poorly welded to engineering. He pushed. The sphere flickered, grew uncertain. The sorcerer spun, howled, flung a chain of void-black lightning. It stitched through Danny's shoulder with cold that felt like being erased. He screamed without making a sound and punched back, hand going atomic green, ectoplasm meeting warp flame and refusing to apologize. "Sleep," he repeated, not a plea now but a promise. The sphere guttered. The lights died like a field of candles pinched by a careful hand. The engines faltered. The maledict shuddered, screamed, and began to fall out of orbit like a prayer answered with gravity. Danny staggered, left a smear of star sickness on the floor, and phased through a kilometer of hatred back toward the coffin with engines. Cole's voice, steady as winter, guided him in. They blasted free as the command ship rolled like a dying god and broke apart in a love letter to Newton. The fleet buckled. The breach in the sky spasmed and then stitched itself shut, pouting. Across the planet, demons evaporated into a fended mist. Silence came, stunned and raw. It had a taste. Dust and blood and the first sweet edge of water. They called him a dozen things that day. Aberration, asset, angel. Cassie called him kid, then hero, then Danny, and hugged him like someone who hadn't decided whether to cry or laugh and chose both. Varro wrote a report in a book whose cover was scarred by history and did not meet Danny's eyes as often as before. Cole simply clapped him on the shoulder and looked at the horizon, where dawn practiced. They asked if he had a home to go back to. He looked at the sky, at the way it kept trying to tear and be mended, at the people who would always be outnumbered by the things that wanted to unmake them. He thought of Amity Park, of a kitchen table and a broken toaster and friends who would never stop looking for him. He thought of a boy who had fallen through color and landed in a place that didn't believe in mercy but still, somehow, needed it desperately. "I'll find a way back," he said. "Someday." He looked at Cole, at Cassie, even at Varro. "But until then, someone's gotta help." Cole's smile was a scar that had learned a better shape. "Then help," he said. So Danny Phantom stayed. He learned the rhythms of a war that never slept. He became rumor and rallying cry and green comet over broken skylines. He fought demons and doubt and the slow erosion of the soul that comes with waking to sirens every day. He learned the liturgy of bolter and blade and added to it his own author's note, compassion as insurgency. When the warp leaned close and whispered gifts with hooks, he leaned closer and said no with a grin that kept getting sharper. On nights when the stars wobbled like loose teeth and the quiet stank of coming storms, he would stand on the spine of a cathedral ship beside Captain Cole and listen to the creak of ancient armor, the prayer of engines, the heart of a species too stubborn to die. He would touch the charm Cassie had given him, flack cloth with a drawn smile, and remember the boy who fixed toasters. In the blood-orange dawn after the maledict fell, he flew over a city trying to decide if it still believed in itself. Windows opened. Children pointed, faces lit by something other than fire. An old woman made the sign of an Aquila with shaking hands and whispered a thank you meant for someone else. Danny didn't correct her. He just kept flying, a streak of impossible green across a sky that had almost learned how to break, and the people below straightened a little and picked up bricks and prayers, and somewhere far beyond the edge of the map the warp frowned. He would find the way home one day. Or he wouldn't. Either way, until the gates stayed shut and the night stopped hating the morning, he had work. And the work here at the end of everything was simple in a way that felt like a vow. Keep as many people alive as you can for as long as you can and teach the dark to fear the light.